Hi, it's me again, Laurie, and I'm back. And I'm back to talk a little bit more about how we can know the season of Christ's return. We don't know the day or the hour, and we learned yesterday everybody knows to say that half of a verse. But we can know the seasons because Christ really outlined some things for us and also gave us parables to substantiate the things that he taught to the disciples. In an earlier video, we talked about Matthew 24 and how Christ was giving literal signs to his disciples so they would know what to be watching for two things: at the sign of his coming and the signs of the end of the age. But in Matthew 25, just after he finishes these discourses, he starts to give parables. The first one is actually at the end of Matthew 24. It's the parable of the fig tree. But today we're going to look at the parable of the 10 virgins. It's a very interesting parable. And I hope that you know a lot about the Jewish customs, because learning about Jewish customs and culture has really opened the Word of God up for me. And I just really encourage everyone to look at deeply into the roots of so much of what Christ was teaching. And this is a perfect example. In this parable, Christ has wrapped up giving literal signs to his disciples, and now he's going to talk to them in a familiar setting, and that is some wedding language. If you were a disciple at that time, you would have known that when Christ even starts this with there were 10 virgins, they would know that he was talking about bridesmaids. When a young couple back in that time got engaged, the bride would go and select bridesmaids, and they had to be virgins, or customarily they were. The groom would leave and go and prepare a place for the bride, start building on to his father's house a place for her to come and live with him, the two of them. And depending on how rich or well off this groom was would depend on how long he was gone. And so if he was building a really nice place, it'd take him a little longer. So the bride never knew when the groom would be returning, nor did her wedding party that she had selected. So bridesmaids would take lamps, put oil in them, and put them in their windows at night, because it was customary that the groom, when he finished his preparations and was coming for the bride, they would come at midnight when all the city was dark and everyone was asleep. So he blows a shofar. The bridal party starts at his house, and they come into the village, and you guessed it, the bridesmaids, where the lamps are lit, he knows is the wedding party. So these girls would also begin to hear the commotion, hopefully hear the shofar being blown as they were coming into the city. And they would take these lamps and they would run down and they would go out to meet the groom. Now it's dark, so they needed these lamps to see and meet him. And he would know when these lamps were coming, the wedding party was coming to meet him. They would wind through town and they would end up at the bride's home, which is a fantastic story. There's more to it, and I will give you the whole wedding scene and analogy of how that relates to the second coming of Christ in a future video. But today we're focusing on this particular parable. So in this parable, Jesus explains that in this wedding particularly, there were 5 wise bridesmaids and there were 5 unwise virgin bridesmaids. And the 5 wise gals had poured additional oil in their lamp, took some additional oil with them, and went out to meet the groom. Well, the groom was far away and was a long time coming. Gosh, it's really been a long time since Christ left too, hasn't it? But anyway, they hear the shout, they hear the celebration. Have you started to hear the echoes of a celebration? I have. So these girls go out, but it's still a while before the groom gets to them. And so when their lamps go out, they have additional oil to light them. There were 5 unwise virgins, and those gals didn't take extra oil. And when their oil burns out, they ask the girls that had oil for their oil. And they went, no, we can't give you our oil. Go buy some. Now, while these unwise virgins were off looking for oil to meet the bridegroom, he shows up. And he takes the 5 and he takes them back, and eventually they end up at a wedding feast, and you'll learn more about that. And they shut the door. So the 5 unwise get the oil and come to the door and knock on it and say, let us in, let us in. We're part of the wedding party. And here's what Jesus says to them. Truly, I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you do not know the day or the hour. Now, he said to these unwise bridesmaids that he did not know them. And that is a sign of, because he ends this parable with watch therefore, because you don't know when I'm coming. Just like the bride would not know when the groom was coming. It's the same. It's a word picture for us. And because these girls were kept out, he said, I didn't know you. And then he says, watch therefore. So he's switching from the parable to his disciples and saying, watch, because you don't know. You need to be watchful so you'll know the time. You'll know the season. See, he wants us to know that he's coming. We don't know the exact moment, but we can know the season. And if you're watching and paying attention, then you are probably a lot like me and thinking that it's not going to be too terribly long before we see Christ come again and take his seat in Jerusalem. So exciting. So very exciting. So, I'm Laurie Green Westlake. That's Laurie, Laurie, and you can find me at lauriegreenwestlake.com. Love to have you drop in. Love sharing this with you. Be blessed. And I've got my camo on today and I'm ready for battle. Be brave.